So this week we have important topic to cover, and first important topic to cover this week is reusable React components. What you see on the screen is a React application that is built uh, using some of the concepts that we have learned in past weeks. You see there are three fields here: username field, email address field, and password field. User can enter some username, some sort of email, and then they can enter the password, and then they can hit register to register, or they can click on a reset button to reset all the fields. If you look at the underlying code that is used for rendering this user registration form, uh, I have the code prepared for you beforehand so we can focus on the real stuff in the class. Uh, if you look at the line 30 to 44, this is block of code which is used for rendering the username input box. Very similarly, if you look at the code block from line 47 to 60, this is the code block that is used for handling or rendering the email address field. And very similarly, we have line 63 to 76, which is um, used for rendering the password input field. So we have three code blocks to render these things. Now, if you carefully look at all the three code blocks, let me try to make this smaller, or not smaller, but I'll try to uh, maybe make a comparison. If you look at the first two lines, it's the same div, the same class name, a label, which indicates for what it is rendering the HTML, and it has the same class name again, like the line 48, and same goes for the password field as well. Same class name for div, a label, and the same class name for the label. Only certain details are changing between this block of code, and um, it is actually making uh, sort of repetitive code on our code base. And one of the biggest drawbacks of repetitive code is us doing additional work to execute the same changes that are needed for our um needed for our uh, let's say needed for our code to update. So for example, what do I mean by that? Let's say we want to, instead of showing a white font on our label, we want some other font. Tell me, let's put it yellow. So we go to our CSS file and we say a class name font yellow, and we say color. Now, if I have to show a yellow color on all the three um, labels, I have to make this adjustment three times. So right now I have it only on the username. I'll have to manually go here and do it three times. And imagine we are just beginning to build this application. If we had a very large application, let's say like an Amazon, which has thousands and thousands of such input boxes, doing this kind of a operation on each line will take a lot of time, and it is error prone. So, um, uh, what do I mean by it's error prone? Maybe I made this font yellow yesterday, and today I forgot the class name and I said font, and I spelled a spelling mistake. I did something like this. Now it will take tremendous amount of time for me to find this kind of an issue. Plus, even worse, if I did this, I use this class, my fellow developer who might be tasked to change the color for email, they'll need to go and make this such change, figure out what actually the class name is and then make the change, and that adds another layer of other another layer of problems. So to counter that, right, what React suggests, and this is general in a lot of other frameworks, is use the reusable components. And React is a really powerful framework if you leverage this feature. Uh, what I traditionally advise is to create another directory, is- which is called components, and then start putting your reusable components. So let's create a reusable component input field, and let's do export cost input field. So we are defining an input field component, and we are going to return the similar input markup that we were using for our three fields. So what do I mean by that is simply just copy paste. First step is to copy paste the markup that we have, and then leverage the concepts that we have learned in the past, which is passing the details through props in child components. So now the question comes, what are the details that I should be uh, passing? So we go back to our app component and compare both the input fields. And if you look here on the line 31 versus line 48, the HTML4 is something that is changing. Then line 32, the field name is changing. Same goes for ID and type and the value as well. Value is changing form data dot username and form data dot email. And then the type of callback function is also changing. And let's not worry about the focus for now. That's going to be another concept in the class very soon. But let's make our component generic so that it can receive the dynamic values like ID or field or function as properties. So we have seen it two ways. Either we can do props or more modern way we can do is props dot, for example, here we can assign props dot ID, or the more modern way that we have seen in the past is using the destructuring of props object, and we can directly provide ID here and use this ID directly here. Uh, can I have a volunteer who can identify another another value that I should be receiving from property? Anyone?
Label?
That's very good. Who was that?
Said label.
Yes, that's very good. So the username itself, the label value, or we call it the label or label value, uh, that we can make it dynamic. And here we can use the same thing because these are the uh, same stuff. Then the type as well. If you see the type of the field here is text, but if I go back to my code for email, it's a type email, which lets us render email. So let's take email, sorry, the type, and use that as our input to our component. Also the value. If you see value is value here as well as uh, value as well as uh, the type of the value, which is username or email or password. So let's call it just simply value or field value. Let's be more explicit and call it field value. And then also this function that we need to receive from parent. Let's call it the same thing. That form data we will receive it from, and I will come back to focus later as I have explained. And now our task is to import this in our app component. First step is to import our newly built uh, input field from input, and let's on the first step replace our um, and before I replace, let's look at number of line of code we have right now. Almost have for just the simple three fields from line 32 to 78 we have had a code to maintain. Instead, now first let's replace the input field with the input field for username with input. What I usually do is not for me not to forget. I just go here. Once I've defined my component, I copy everything and then I come here and I go line by line. And I instead of commas, I'll just do equal, and then I usually do it like this so that I don't forget. ID equal to username. Then we need to define our label value, which is username with U capital. Now we need to define our type. So if you see, I'm not trying to remember anything, but I'm going off the code that was already defined for me and leveraging it for my benefit. Field value is form data dot username. So this is not a static value, so we need to determine it. And then last is the set form data. Now if I go back, I should see double username, which means I can remove my previously coded username. Let's comment that out. And now, very similarly, let's replace the email address field. So if I come here and expand my email address, I can copy the input field and, and format it so it looks better. Now all I have to do is pick up each of the values from the previously coded stuff when I'm doing this is one of the important names for this activity is refactoring your code to make it more manageable. Um, and then the label here is email address, type is email, and form data.email. And I can simply similarly comment this out. And very similarly, let's replace the code at the password field. So this is going to be ID is going to be password. The label is going to be password with P capital, and value would be your password, and type would be password as well. And with that, we have done the replacement for password field as well. So at this point, I have replaced entire repetitive code that I had with a reusable component called input field. And now I have a complete freedom of using this uh, anywhere inside my application. And I know that it will look the same, behave the same. And if any issues or updates are needed, we will just need to come and do it one place. What is a good example for that? For example, if you want to have uh, sort of a colon after each field, you just make the colon change at one place. And now I see the colon appearing at all three places. And now, because I have font yellow defined just once, I can go and change font um, off white or something. And we can define this class. Ideally, you should be having the class CSS definition alongside the component, and you would have input field.css so that it's telling everyone that this CSS belongs to uh, the input field only. And now we can define the off-white class here, and we can say, let's say color is equal to CCC. Oh, this is off-white. And yes, so now we have, using this simple change, we are able to uh, change the font for all three fields from single place. I could have defined this as again white, or even though I'm calling off white. And by simple one change, I'm able to change it for all three fields. So now I have a consistent look and feel and consistent code to render the same kind of features. So anybody have any questions on this? Anyone? Uh, I'm assuming no questions. So we'll move on to another important aspect of which we have seen a lot of use in the past as well. And that concept is inline versus non-inline handlers, function handlers. So if I go back to my input field component that was defined, and stop me here if you guys are confused. I'm more than happy to re-explain the concept. If you look at line 14 to uh, 17, it is generally not advised to have uh, the stuff coded like this, and instead we should be doing something about if we have to write multiple lines of code, uh, then we should be handling the code in the more non-inline manner. So what line 14 to 17 is showing is inline definition of a function where you're handling everything in a single line, and we have similar handling in the app.jsx on the reset button, which resets our form. Now, when you have only small set of activities to do, in this case, just invoking function without many arguments, which is resetting the form data, then it is okay to use this kind of inline notation. But when you have this kind of more complex, uh, activity to do, uh, then you should be not leveraging inline, but you should be defining explicit functions to handle this. So what would be a good definition is uh, const. We have seen this in past. Uh, on change handler. This is nothing new, but this is me explaining the explicit difference between uh, both the both the stuff. So we will receive the event, and we will make this inline, and now it makes the more sense. And let's read the event value. So console log event. Let's read the target, which is our input box directly. So what we are interested in is uh, let's somebody is doing this target dot let's and we are directly getting the input. Uh, we can leverage the target dot value, and every time I type a character, it's appearing here. And soon we will fix why we are not able to see it. But I'm now getting the form handling done, and now I have to call this function and uh, set form data. And if we go back to our definition of set form data in the parent component, uh, it expects a field as well. So let's actually define a new handler, actually const set form from child component. And you will quickly see why we need this. And then the field value, and then the actual value. So now we can use this and do our set form data, and then we can do this is something called array restructuring. And if you guys are not familiar with this notation, I will soon explain if anybody is not familiar. Okay, so we can say form data, and field value and value. I'll explain this code very soon. And let's use this instead of set form data. And we could have, so this takes field value and value, two things. If you look at our input box, input field component, the field value actually matches the ID itself. So email is matching with this email on the line 51, and password is matching with the line 51. That's why I do not need to do anything special when I go to my child component. But if you guys were ever coding this, and if you end up using different name in ID and field value for the form, then you'll need to be extremely careful because that can result in bugs. So we can do, as we've seen, ID is matching the field value. So we can do is set form data ID and the value. So this can get confusing. So let me bring in the code from app.jsx here for your reference. So this is, I know this is a little bit of a complex code, so I will put this in the GitHub. You guys have the reference for this code. So this is my code from app.jsx. It needs a field value and the actual value. So field value identifies what field of the form to be updated, and the value is actual value. So I'm giving you it two argument, and uh, let's go back to our application now. And looks like this might not have been triggered yet. So let's go back to app.jsx.
Do you need to save anything in the local storage?
Not for this because we are, so look, you save information which is safe to save in local storage. A username or a password or those kind of stuff are traditionally not saved on local storage. Sometimes username, but uh, not most of the time.
Where are you going to store it?
So this would not be ideally stored. Once user is entering all the details here, they would be um saving the value on the database. You would not be saving password anywhere, right? Or somebody's email address, because that can become a sort of a, that can actually lead to data breach, right? If you understand what I mean.
Yeah,
So
wouldn't you save it in a Python database in some sort of like a data dump?
yes, not traditionally Python, but I mean, yeah, in a real database like a SQL database or a MongoDB database or something of that sort. But you have the right idea, yes. I made this mistake. Let me see if this fixes. Yes. So now we are using dynamic field value along with the actual value. And how do I know this? Let me comment this out. So let me explain this flow. Otherwise, this can get confusing. Is now I have the, I go to app.jsx, the value was, you guys can do, you are aware about this, right? You can, instead of doing this, you can do field single line string. So let's go back to our code and refresh this. And I think I lost some of my style, but that's okay. Uh, it will make input label container. Let's put all of this and input field CSS. And let's see some of my styles are back or not. Yes. And where did my flex container go? So you guys should not ever worry if something uh, bad happens to your code. Just look at this debugging and did I remove the import? Oh yeah, I import from well when we imported our thing, we removed the import from of app.css. So yeah, once you are familiar with your code, you should be able to detect such issues really quickly, you know. And I purposefully not rush past any errors that we see just to showcase how we can actually debug when we are working on the code. So now we have everything set up for us nicely. We have a reusable component. We are using an inline function handler in the button as well as non-inline function handler in the our component as well. Let me put a comment here so it's not confusing. So in ideal scenario, right, as you rightly mentioned, we would be once we do this, uh, and when we hit register, we would be uh, submitting this form. What you see here is this console log form submitted with these details. We would be calling an API to save this information in the database. Um, and the saving of this information in database, this code can be written in JavaScript using Node.js or using Python or Java, any of the other backend programming languages. So yeah, you have the right idea. Yes. But here in this case, we would never be saving this kind of sensitive information on local storage because whatever is there on the local storage can be looked up by any adversary, any third party website which may can access your local storage as well as any third person. Maybe if you're sharing your computer, people can go in on your application tab and look at the local storage, you know. Like for example, this is a search term from our previous class where we were filtering on fruits. It's still there. This has not been cleaned up. So I am able to see, assuming that somebody else was working on this, I'm able to see this information. I don't want people to see my password like this. That's why we do not save such sensitive information on the on the uh, what on the sort of local storage. Now another important concept, and today's class is a bit heavy, so you guys stop me when you feel confused or have any questions. Um, Now, traditionally, we tell React what to do and how to show. So what do I mean by that is uh, we are actually telling React, I want to see this, I want to see that, uh, and I want to show the username. I want to see the password. I want to see an input box. I want to see uh, uh, sort of a password field with such things. And what I just did was uh, I added a class, simply speaking. Right now, if you see, when I go in and focus, I think this might not be the correct way to do it. Uh, is uh, this is highlighting or focusing when I click on this, and this we have told React to do, but what we can identify is uh, let's say if somebody is clicking on the register and they have not uh, uh, sort of put the value in the input box or username, we can explicitly detect that. So if I go back to uh, handle submit, we are logging the form data. And if we let's say if form data dot username is empty, so nobody has
So if it's
uh,
null,
null, or in our case we are defining it as an empty default value. If we were not doing this, we could do a null check as well, yes. But because on the line 7 we have it empty, so it's not going to be null because it has a empty value attached to it. Then we want to do some sort of error, right? Hey, username is mandatory. So let's do this. We are getting this error on the console, but how does a user know? So we can pass another uh, field in our input box to make it more, in the textbook terms, more imperative. So what we have done right now is line 43 to 49 is a declarative definition of the component where we are explicitly telling that give me an input field uh, which has a username, a label value username, type text, and nothing else. But now I want to sort of when somebody is trying to register the form, I want to explicitly do error handling and set my focus to the field like this. If I were not did that, and if I came here, I want this field to be highlighted, and this becomes an imperative paradigm for handling the JSX and React. Ideally, it is not advised to use imperative programming in React. React is much good at declarative programming and is meant to be used that way. But some situations, right, warrant us to do uh, this kind of imperative programming, and where we are focusing on the element uh, explicitly. So to do that, let's do something. We will use a new hook from React and we will provide a direct reference to this input element, and let's define this reference. Const input ref equal to use ref. Let me look at the exact syntax so that I don't make mistake and we don't spend uh, too much time. Yes, this needs a null, and now I have to bind this reference to the input box itself. Ref, and we use the this could be any name, my ref. Then you have to use the my ref here. It doesn't matter what name you define, but we make it more generic. And let's remove this autofocus for now. And now we go to our app.jsx. And when we are doing, if username is empty, then let's set a variable const user name focus and equal to use state false. So I am not, uh, so I will see why using false here. So I originally we don't want username to be false, and we can say set focus, or let's call it is focus, and we can say username focus. So whenever this variable is true, then focus on the username field, and we can now uh, use this state variable.
So this will automatically put the cursor into the username form.
Yes,
Okay.
and this is a one pattern that you will see a lot when you're actually building real world applications, specifically when you're handling with forms a lot. So let's do this. So we are catching our error here on the line 18. Whenever this error happens, let's do this. Set username focus true. So we have done one part correct. Let's not just throw, let me move it on top of the for throwing the error. So we have the whole chain. And now we are still getting username is mandatory. Now let's use this new value here. And now we have to look for change in this value. Can anybody think of a React hook which can be handy to do this? We have used that hook a lot. Anyone?
Use effect.
Yes, that's very good answer. The use effect. So in use effect, I will define my code such that first I will tell React that this use effect code, let me put it, let me actually put everything in the bottom so that this reference, when you guys get the code, is at one place. I'm telling React to run this use effect on the basis of is focus variable and do something if is focus is set, then uh, console.log do focus on input. for now, I'm just doing this only, and let's see if we are doing it, getting it. So oh, we did not say about app.jsx, or we did. Let's for now use this as false everywhere else because we don't want that behavior to be present on other other fields. And console log the value of back and see what's happening in there. Let's remove this for now. So we are getting form submitted, but check focus is getting not set, getting true. Why? We just need to refresh our DOM. Looks like sometimes the code get cached. And now we have put this in the use ref. Now instead of actually console logging it, let's do this. So we are going to use our input ref that we had defined. And this is again not really an ideal practice, and use ref should be avoided when possible. Okay. So I'm going to say use ref dot current dot uh, I believe the function is called itself focus. If you see my focus, so let me show that again. I'm putting something on the email field and something in the password field, and I'm hitting register. My cursor is automatically moving to the username field. Uh, and that's how we can use the imperative React programming to directly modify the behavior of DOM elements. This was a direct behavior uh, on the direct behavior change on the uh, input box. So let's see what other function I can show you guys so it makes more sense. I believe the add class is a function. Let me see if add class is a function, Uh, class list. Forgot the exact function. If someone can search how to directly add a class on an element. Yeah, we can do it like this. So we can do something like that as well, Uh, error class. So the class list might not be a function. That's fine. Similarly, we can add class as well and sort of highlight the element. Well, I'll put the exact function that can add that class. But this is a very dangerous operation and should be avoided when possible. Okay, use use ref should be avoidable if you're finding yourself, and this is going to come a lot. Uh, this will come actually in the interview as well, and will actually come a lot in when you actually start building a project. If you find yourself using use ref every now and then and too often, that means you are breaking the concepts of React, uh, which are, and you should reevaluate your code and refactor your code so that the dependency on useref can be reduced. There are only specialized cases on the where such thing is necessary. Now, the final concept that we want to sort of cover for today is uh, component composition. It's a fancy word, but if let's say if I were to sort of showcase this button and div, right? Uh, and let's say right now our input field component is a single entity itself, and it doesn't show anything actually in itself. So what do I mean by that is uh, let's say we had a new another component in our code which is called card component card.jsx, and const card and return the I am card component. And let's import this card component in our app.jsx. And let me display at the bottom my card component. I am a card component. I could actually uh, pass this button as an input to this card component as let me cut these two buttons in the card component, and instead of uh, and let me actually move this entire block of code so that it's more clear, is from the div to everything inside the card component. We have not seen this kind of pattern till now. We are actually passing uh, uh, sort of passing another another entire JSX markup or HTML markup to component, and that's where component composition uh, comes into the uh, picture. Is let's say we could do something like this, and now we could actually leverage something called children's here, and we can actually just uh, in my view, let me check the exact syntax. This is a little bit of complex codes, and I don't want us to be uh, uh, struggling too much on this. So yeah, remember we had used the JSX. When we use children, we are adding more than one element, and we need to have a common parent for this, and that's where we can leverage our JSX. And now you see my register and the reset are rendered here. If somewhere in the application I wanted to render this uh, differently, I could do is, for example, instead of rendering the buttons, now I can um, is, I can just pass another a p tag. First card component, and if I can spell first properly, uh, you see, now I am able to render the card component using different kind of stuff with some commonality. So I am a card component is a common logic that is for the card component. But besides that, I'm able to render the difference as well using the child HTML nodes. So this is known as component composition. It's a fancy word, I know, but if you really look at it, uh, there's nothing fancy about it. You are rendering your child element just like you would normally code your HTML markup, and you're putting it inside the opening and closing braces of a component definition. So that sort of wraps up the core concepts we wanted to cover in today's class. I know it's heavy for a single class, and that's why I am again saying if any questions are there on any of these concepts, let's try to solve them now.